today we're in the prayer room, which is right off the entrance, the south entrance. It's a really nice location. Sometimes I think it's easy for us to walk right by here and not even realize it's here. So next time you're in, take a peek in. It's a great place to come and think about things, and we have a board with prayer concerns. So, as mentioned earlier, a lot earlier last week and Sunday, we're talking about Isaiah. On Pastor John's last Sunday, he made reference to the first sermon that he ever preached in seminary, in the sermon text that he had, and how he remembered it. This text from Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, this was the first text I was ever assigned to preach on in seminary as well. And it's kind of interesting. It was very terrifying the first time you preached to the seminary community. All of your faculty members are there, and all of your biblical teachers are there. And in my case, having Isaiah, obviously thinking in the back of my mind, what are my Old Testament profs going to think about this? They didn't get up and walk out, so it must have been okay. The first time you do some sermons, it's really a surprisingly difficult challenge. It's also much easier to do a long sermon than it is a short sermon. A long sermon, you can ramble on and maybe eventually get to your point. The short sermon, you've got to be sort of right there and ready for. And in seminary, that was kind of the important thing. This text has been maybe my favorite text in the Bible ever since that time. I'll start reading it and we'll go through it a little bit. In the year that King Uzziah died, and that would have been 742 BC or 735 BC, they're not always sure precisely what year Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Obviously, we're starting out with a vision. We saw with Moses, he was at the burning bush, and that's where God called and commissioned Moses. Here we have Isaiah transported into this vision of the temple, and God literally filling the temple. And we have these seraphs, these heavenly beings, that are in attendance with God, and they have 6 wings. And then they call to one another, Holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Obviously, probably where the hymn, Holy, 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 came from, this verse 3. And then it goes on. The pivots on the threshold shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. There's a lot going on in those simple verses, that concept, and it seems like something I've thought and said many times, woe is me. Here, the New Revised Standard, it says, I am lost, I'm a man of unclean lips, I live among a people of unclean lips. Back when I had this text and it was just the regular RSV, and I liked it so well, it said, woe is me, for I am cut off. And the thought of being cut off just really sort of jumped out at me, being separated, from God or from whatever. And then it goes on, he's a man of unclean lips. Okay, it's a little confession of sin. And his realization that the people he lived with were also the people of unclean lips, the people, sinners. And then he says, Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. It was a long-standing tradition, and probably it's still there today, that if you see God's face, you are going to die. And so to see God's face, to physically see God's face, was kind of I'll say a threatening thing. And so, woe is me, I'm lost, I'm cut off. And yet he has seen the face of God, the Lord of hosts. So the vision, goes on and continues. Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraph touched my mouth, and it said, "Now this has touched your lips. Your guilt has departed, and your sin is blotted away." So here we have the concept of the purifying fire. In this case, a hot ember from the fire that was perpetually lit in the seminary. In the temple. And, it touches his lips, and it's a sign of his own, I'll say, being made clean, the fire purifying him. And then we have this very interesting verse. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, he doesn't say he sees the Lord saying this, he hears the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And ever since listening to these words the first time, it has always kind of struck me funny, because we can picture Isaiah standing there, the only human in this heavenly council with God, a vision in the temple, and God saying, "Well, who should I send? Who will go for us?" And Isaiah looking around, and there's nobody else there. So he answers them, "Here I am, send me." And then God gives him his commission, which is kind of an interesting and a strange thing. So for Moses, we have this conversation with God with the burning bush. With Isaiah, we're in the temple with a vision of God and these heavenly beings. And we have, Isaiah kind of an insight into him as he realized that, woe is me. I am a sinful person, and I live among sinful people, the unclean lips. And then God calls and says, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And, again, Moses being the only person there, he probably realized, it's me or nobody. So he says, "Here am I, send me." Then the text gets kind of funny, maybe challenging. Maybe it gives us an image of God we don't want to have. So after Isaiah says, "Here I am, send me," God says, "Go and say this to the people. Keep listening, but do not comprehend. Keep looking, but do not understand. Make the mind of all the people dull, and stop their ears and shut their eyes, so that they may not look with their eyes and listen with their ears, and comprehend with their minds, and turn and be healed." So on the surface, it sounds like, God is telling Isaiah, this is the message you have for me for the people. Don't pay any attention, don't listen to me. Shut your eyes, don't see what the Lord wants you to do. And it goes on, and Isaiah says, "How long, O Lord? How long is it going to be this way? How long will I have to serve you in this manner with these people?" And the Lord says, "Until cities lie waste without inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is utterly desolate. Then until the Lord sends everyone far away, and vast is the emptiness in the midst of the land." So the message is, tell these people not to pay any attention to me, in so many words. And Isaiah says, "And how long is this going to go on? How long is this going to last?" And, God gives a rather lengthy explanation. "Until cities lie waste without inhabitants, and houses without people, the land is utterly desolate." Well, when we hear these words, we know what God's talking about. We know that it was when Nebuchadnezzar came in, destroyed the temple, and carried away all the people. And people have kind of wondered about that. Did the Babylonians actually carry away all these people of Israel? And archaeology, and on the surface you're thinking, well, okay, they carried away the rich and powerful people. They left the poor people to farm the land. But archaeologists tell us that it really was desolate. The people were totally gone, maybe much against our own understanding of how this would have happened. There's a book out, and the subtitle is The Archaeology of Desolation, when talking about the area around Jerusalem after the Babylonians came in. And then the text concludes with, even if a tenth part remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains standing when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. And so here we have then all the imagery about David and the remnant and the people of Israel and the remnant that remains. I've often thought in this day and age where church attendance has become so difficult and where we see so many church closings that, we're maybe in that time that we can look at ourselves and our congregation, other congregations with which we're familiar, and realizing that, they're all smaller than they were some years ago, but God is still working through us, and God still relies on us, and that we are that modern stump from which the new tree will grow. So we hear these words, a very interesting vision of Isaiah, by Isaiah, and his response, here I am, send me. And here we are today, called in a difficult time, as Isaiah was called in an amazingly difficult time. The enemy very well could have been all around the city of Jerusalem when he has this vision. And yet he saw the hope even through the dark days, through the desolation that happened in Judah, that happened around Jerusalem. And so today we look at ourselves and we realize that there are not as many of us, but God still needs us and God still relies on us. Thank you very much for being with us today. Let me conclude with a prayer, and then we will have the second verse of the hymn, The Summons. Eternal God, we ask that you would always encourage us as well in difficult times, whether as a congregation, whether in our families, whether by ourselves. We ask that you would always give us the hope that Isaiah felt and Isaiah saw, so that in difficult times we understand that our work as individuals, that our work as Zion Lutheran Church is so very important for God and the world. We thank you for your word always. We thank you for the vision of Isaiah and how that vision can be our vision as well, of a God who is graceful, who redeems us, who sends us into the world. Amen.